California have just passed a bill meaning that doctors can be sacked for spreading COVID misinformation. If the state are intervening between a doctor and a patient, what is left of your world now? Do you want the state peering into your bottom? Do you want the state taking your temperature? If doctors can't give medical advice, what's next? Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage towards truth and freedom. For stay free we must, and stay free we do. Every day on Rumble at these times. Join us in the stream. Real experts, real conversation, free from censorship, completely inclusive and open to absolutely all of you. Let's have a look at the news, see if we can understand it a little better. In particular, today, Gavin Newsom, the California governor, has just signed a bill meaning that doctors can be sacked for spreading COVID misinformation. Of course, any doctor should be sacked for not telling the truth or not conveying medical information accurately or doing something in a medical context that could be harmful. But I believe they've already got an oath for that, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. Now, do you trust the government to intercede in the space that exists between you and your doctor? If by some miracle you can actually see one. For me, this is another example of government overreach, of the government trying to control what you believe, what you see, what you understand. And given that the government likely get their advice and the information from a non-elected globalist body like the WHO, funded by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who ultimately is in charge of your body and your health. And we know, don't we, that the government received considerable revenue through lobbying and other means from the pharmaceutical industry. So where is your health in all of this? This is not a conspiracy theory. Let's stick to the facts. Let's see what's true. Let's see if there are any administrative or global bodies trying to come between you and your doctor and make decisions for ourselves, whether or not that's what we want for ourselves, our families, our loved ones. California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed legislation that would allow the state medical board to discipline physicians and surgeons who spread coronavirus misinformation during direct patient care. Starts with coronavirus. Again, this is not about whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, whether you're pro-lockdown, anti-lockdown, whether you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump. I don't care. I do care. I care about you. I care about you. It's just I don't think I know more than you about what you should believe in politically or even medically. What I am willing to say is I don't want the state involved in ultimately, really, in what I tell my children and what I do with my children beyond sort of obvious criminal stuff. I don't want the state involved with my medical relationships with medical experts beyond sort of obvious criminal stuff. And actually, in both those cases, we already have laws for that called don't kill people laws and don't harm people medical protocols. These things don't need additional regulation, and my assumption will be that that regulation and legislation will ultimately be used to penalise people that disagree with them and to present further economic opportunities to already powerful pharmaceutical interests. Let's see where we are now. Let's see where we could end up. Yeah. The bill, AB 2098, states that any licensed physician or surgeon is committing unprofessional conduct if they disseminate misinformation or disinformation. That should be bloody obvious anyway, about the nature of risks of the virus, the prevention and treatment of COVID-19, and the development, safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. If there's a sort of a backlash of doctors not agreeing with it, doesn't that mean that there might be medical grounds? Is there a long history, is there, of doctors going, well, I simply refuse to apply band-aids to a bleeding wound. Just spit on it. It'll be fine. Is there a long history of people going, ripping out dialysis machines and saying, I don't believe in dialysis machines? Has it been a problem up to now? Misinformation is defined in the legislation as false information that's contradicted by contemporary scientific consensus contrary to the standard of care. Contemporary scientific consensus. Who provides contemporary of this time scientific? That means we did experiments. Consensus, that means we all agree. Let's make sure that those terms are aligned alloyed to and allied with throughout the rest of this article. The law would designate spreading false or misleading medical information to patients as unprofessional conduct, subject to punishment by the agency that licenses doctors, the Medical Board of California. That could include suspending or revoking a doctor's license to practice medicine in the state. So they'll be able to boot doctors out, suspend and strike off doctors that disagree with them. But already during the pandemic period, we've seen key workers, medical professionals, nurses, doctors lose their jobs for refusing to undertake certain procedures which YouTube guidelines prevent me from elaborating on, but I suppose might relate to the recent admission by Jane Small, the Pfizer executive, who said,
"Did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No."
And it seemed like those sackings were as a result of people being infectious. Not that I have an opinion on those matters. Well, actually I do, and you can see that opinion over on Rumble, but here on this platform, I have no opinion on that. On this platform, Rumble, you better believe I got an opinion, baby. While the legislation has raised concerns over freedom of speech, forget it. You're free to say anything you like that we already agree with. Come on, say some stuff we agree with. Well, there's no problem with global finance overtaking national sovereignty. Exactly. While the legislation has raised concerns over freedom of speech, the bill's sponsor said the extensive harm caused by false information required holding incompetent or ill-intentioned doctors accountable. I think we'd all like to see incompetent and ill-intentioned doctors. I mean, isn't that something? Oh my God, we never noticed. There's all these incompetent and ill-intentioned doctors out there. So you'll say your son's got a bad ass? That's right, doctor. We're very worried. Okay! Merry Christmas! Did we not have a means for screening them out? No! It's only since COVID-19 that we've even considered the idea of doctors that are not the greatest people in the world. Oh, well, thank God. What a relief. Thanks for helping. In order for a patient to give informed consent, they have to be well informed. Well, I couldn't agree more heartily with the idea of you being given all of the information and being able to make a decision for yourself. This idea that doctors are so poorly informed that they're going to lie malevolently to their patients for a laugh should be nipped in the bud. The more I read about this bill, the more I see how necessary it is. All these evil, cackling, wicked, vicious doctors out there just dying to tell you lies about necessary and helpful medical procedures. I'm glad Gavin Newsom stepped in when he did. Interesting that Gavin Newsom, during the pandemic, felt safe enough to even have that dinner party where people weren't wearing masks with all this misinformation and disinformation everywhere. Phew, lucky escape. He must have a special bad doctor rod somewhere in his governor's mansion. Oh, look, there's another one of those sons of bitches trying to bad advice me to death. California's legislation reflects the growing political and regional divisions that have dogged the pandemic from the beginning. Other states have gone in the other direction, seeking to protect doctors from punishment by regulatory boards, including for advocating treatments involving hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin and other medications that the American Medical Association says remain unproven. And I certainly wouldn't like to contradict the American Medical Association there. Not on this platform. The bill says doctors have a duty to provide their patients with accurate, science-based information. That would include the use of improved vaccines. Science-based information. Science-based information. None of us have got any problem with science-based information. Like this.
You know, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick.
That the virus stops with every vaccinated person.
You want to be a dead end to the virus. So when the virus gets to you, you stop it.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Still up on the platform. Not misinformation yet, guys. What about the explicit and now known relationship between pharmaceutical companies and doctors, in particular around the opioid crisis, which led to them recommending medications that were ultimately bad for their patients as a result of essentially lobbying within the medical industry? Isn't that something that's more important and more in need of immediate address? Making sure that doctors aren't pressured by pharmaceutical companies into prescribing drugs and medicines that are not necessary. Doesn't that sound like that could be at odds with what's happening now? Disempowering doctors, disempowering medical professionals. Wasn't it 2 years ago? Our best, our bravest, and our finest. Those great doctors that are helping us through this pandemic. Okay, where are we now on this timeline of taking over the earth with our evil agenda? We're at this point. Doctors are bastards now. Don't trust them. They're in there lying to you through their teeth. Liana S. Wen, professor at George Washington's University Milken Institute School of Public Health, says the legislation will have a chilling effect on medical practice with widespread repercussions that could paradoxically worsen patient care. I don't think that's a paradox. The problem is that medical practice is rarely black and white. Much of the time, broad recommendations are intended to be tailored to the individual patient. Take the recent guidelines on booster shots. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended that everyone 12 and older receive updated boosters. Most doctors will probably agree that elderly individuals should get the new booster right away, but many might advise, as I would, this is her, not me, I don't have an opinion on this platform, that it's fine for some patients to hold off and time the booster closer to winter holidays. Some providers might not recommend boosters for children and adolescents, especially if they have already had coronavirus. So this is hardly a radical person. This is a person who clearly agrees with vaccines and even coronavirus vaccines, but has a sort of scheduled approach to the administration of those vaccines that would be prevented by this legislation. So even if you're not a kind of, let's call you a conspiracy theorist, because in the eyes of the world you are, even if you're not that, you're just a person that's like, hold on a minute, I'm an informed scientist, then it's still bad. So what's the objective then? AB 2098, taken to the extreme, could put many practitioners at risk. But is it really right for physicians to be threatened with suspension or revocation of their license for offering nuanced guidance on a complex issue that is hardly settled by existing science? How dare you? How dare you offer nuanced guidance on a complex issue that is not yet settled by existing science? You're a monster. That's like someone going, okay, listen, I want to just you could do this, but I just want to make sure, and actually the science isn't settled yet. Get the fuck out of here, you maniac! It's hardly Harold Shipman. Look him up, Americans. Indeed, another lesson from COVID is that science is constantly evolving. In a public health emergency, official guidance often lags cutting-edge research. Consider how long it took the CDC to acknowledge that coronavirus is airborne. Moreover, recovery from infection in combination with vaccination conveys strong protection, but the CDC still does not consider infection to take the place of a booster. If a young patient didn't want a booster for this reason and their doctor agreed, should this be a punishable violation? Again, this is clearly a very modest and we might say, conventional mainstream science analysis that still takes issue with this legislation. So you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to oppose this legislation. But it helps. Medical practice is nuanced, even when there's clear evidence. For example, studies have shown that steroids are not helpful in outpatient treatment of patients with COVID-19, but certain patients, such as individuals with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and asthma, might benefit from them. And physicians need to use their best clinical judgment for their patients' unique circumstances. It's weird, it's like the creeping fog of centralized tyranny is now entering into spaces where, like, that's their allies now are being choked. It's like the friendly fire of tyranny will eventually kill us all. California's bill is a recipe for medical practice to be subject to the whims of partisan politics. It is political. And it challenges the basis of the doctor-patient relationship, a fundamental principle that must go back to like witch doctors and healers and wise women and stuff. Like, well, what are you doing in there with the wise woman? You can't trust her with that toad and those good intentions. Get her out of there! That's a time of deep division, when trust in health officials has already been eroded. Bills that threaten doctors should be reconsidered before unintended consequences create far more problems than the legislation tries to solve. It's almost as if the objective realm of science and the functional framework of medical practice are now being infiltrated by ideology. That you can't be free in any of these spaces, that they would have us automatons, whether it's just ordinary civilians or doctors that have undergone 7 years of training. They're now subject. If they haven't been conditioned by going to medical schools funded by pharmaceutical companies, being lobbied by pharmaceutical companies, and they're still like, no, fighting it all off, determined to do their best for their patients, well, now we're going to legislate against it. Even the writing of Liana S. Wen, who is clearly a person that is pro-vaccine, and I have no opinion on that. I think you should do what's best for you, best for your family, best for yourself. Of course, why would I have any other attitude? She still sees this as dangerous, corrosive, anti-democratic, and a breach of the fundamentals of the relationship between a private citizen and their private physician. So, what do you think's at work here? What is this legislation and regulation an expression of? Whose ideology is it? Whose intentions are at work here? And what regulation do we really need to protect us? If we need protection from our doctors, then God help us in the face of a globalist agenda. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the chat. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have a look at either of these two videos. Sign up to my mailing list so I can tell you about live events and big sexy moves that we're making. Remember to join us every day on Rumble at these times and to join our members community, Stay Free AF, to get unbelievable conversations with Eckhart Tolle, Jordan Peterson, and to join us live as we chat. Stay free.